Welcome to the PWGC Environmental Echo. I'm your host, Paul Boyce, President and CEO of PWGC. Today with me I have two guests, one from PW Grosser, who's Regina Bykov, one of our project managers and engineers, as well as a professional geologist. And I also have Jim Barker, the president of Roanoke Sand Gravel. Today we're going to be talking about construction materials here on Long Island. That's why we brought Jim in. He owns and operates a sand and gravel mine here on Long Island. The primary topics we're going to cover today is the construction materials industry on Long Island, the products that are typically produced at a facility like a sand and gravel mine, and some of the regulatory aspects that oversee and permit these facilities. You know, it's a very interesting topic. It's gotten a lot of press lately here on the island, and we're glad to have Jim with us today to learn more about this. So with that, let's get rolling into the dirt, as we'd say here. So Jim, can you tell us a little bit about your facility or your site out in Middle Island there at Roanoke Sand and Gravel?
Yeah, so it's a 300-acre site. We've been there since 1984, family-owned and operated business, and it's been a mining site, as far as we can tell, since the late 40s. We're able to provide material for high-strength concrete used in a lot of infrastructure, bridges, tunnels, high-rise buildings, things of that nature.
Oh, wow. So it's been a mine since the 1940s, going back to like the World War II era. So when it first started out, you know, were they mining the material for a specific use or any type of specific product that you can tell that may be different from what you're doing today?
Yes. When it first started, it was what we call a dry screening operation, because everything was mined above the water table. And it was used mostly, probably more locally than anything, because at that, back in the day, let's say, there were many sand operations around Long Island and lots of material, lots of availability, unlike today where materials are a lot scarcer and harder to extract or even find a mine site.
Oh, wow. Interesting. So when you're mining the product, right, so you mentioned years ago it was a dry screen, you know, and today you're actually below the water table. Can you tell us today, you know, what's the process? How do you get the sand, the gravel out of the ground? What do you do with it once you get it up? You know, how do you handle it? How do you store it? How do you treat it before it leaves your site?
Sure. Well, we started off with a dry operation, which is basically screening and processing equipment that handles dry materials. Since we started to mine underwater, we use dredges. So typically, as you might see out off the shoreline of Long Island at certain times of the year, bringing beach back up, we use the same kind of equipment. So we use dredges out in the out on the lake.
So it's a hydraulic dredge.
Yes, hydraulic dredge.
Pumping.
Yep. So we pump a great amount of water and material up to a plant that's able to take material in a wet capacity, and that processing plant takes materials and it separates the gradation, and it kind of lays the gradation out so that we can then bring the components we need back into a material that we're trying to create, like a concrete sand or an asphalt sand, or maybe it's a mason sand. So our plant has the ability to segregate the gradation and then bring it back together to produce whatever material we'd like.
So, you know, not to get too technical for people, but when you talk about gradation and separation, you know, how's that done? I've seen it done with, you know, shakers through various screens.
Yeah, it starts with that. It starts with a shaker where it first removes any of the oversized gravel, anything from like 3/8 of an inch and up is removed at the first process. The second process, it comes through a what's called a classifying tank. And the classifying tank is where it separates all the sizes of grains in the sand. And it's all computer controlled. We're able to then plug in a recipe, we call it, to make a certain type of sand. And it tells the plant exactly what valves to open. So we have a big trough, basically, with coarse to fine sand. And it'll open valves and it'll take the necessary gradation it needs to create the recipe that we've plugged into the computer. So concrete sand, New York State approved concrete sand, asphalt sand, many different types of material.
Interesting. Roughly, what's your processing capabilities? How many tons or cubic yards could your facility do in, say, a day or a week or a month?
So we can do, our plant can do, we could probably produce about 1,000 ton an hour if it all depends on how the dredge rate is and how much material he's pumping, but typically we do about 1.5 million tons we process every year, or have that capacity to do that. Yeah. We sell or we move across our scale anywhere from 400,000 to 1 million tons a year.
Wow. That's a lot of sand and gravel.
Yes, that's a lot.
So as the mine gets deeper, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going a little bit further below the water table. Does it take longer to mine it, or is it just the same rate? Or is it any obstacles that get with become prevalent with depth? Or
Yeah, actually, with our dredges, the depth doesn't really have effect on the production. The distance, the further out we are in the lake, certainly the more pipeline we need to put in to get it to the plant. So that does take away from production a bit, but it's once it's running, it's very capable of producing.
That's great. And I know we've worked with you guys for years, right? And I know you've got equipment out over a lake now, effectively, which is essentially hydraulically connected to groundwater.
Right.
And I know you guys use equipment that does not have a lot of hydraulic fluids. It's usually electrically operated, maybe with natural gas generators. Can you tell us a little bit about that? That's
Sure.
what you guys do to really, protect the environment.
Sure. Well, once we got the approval on dredging into the water, we decided we wanted to keep it really safe. We wanted to keep it clean. We didn't want to take any chances with any fuel transfer. Typically, a dredge might be a diesel-operated dredge, and you'd have fuel transfer out on the water. We chose to go electric with everything so that there is no fuel out on the water. There's no oils, there's no lubricants, basically. The processing plant is fully electric, and we produce our own power. We have a 3 meg generation plant that is run on natural gas. So it's a very, very clean operation.
Jim, that's great, and that's what I think our listeners are looking to hear. Keep it clean, keep it safe. You started to touch on some of the different products that you guys manufacture, from the mining. You mentioned a mortar type sand, and I'm very familiar with some of your concrete products, the asphalt products, the big major construction type stuff. But I know you guys, you can get into some real specialty stuff there too. Would you mind telling us what else you guys can make besides, sidewalks and roadways type of things?
Sure, absolutely. We're asked to come up with a lot of different mixes and a lot of different specification material that's really only our plant is capable of producing. We also produce on a local level as well concrete and asphalt on a local level for residential use and for any kind of site plan work. We make materials for the equestrian community. We make materials for New York Racing Association. So we do racetrack surface materials. We do arena surface materials. We provide materials for any of the people on Long Island who even have a couple of stalls in their backyard.
Wow.
So we do that. And the other thing that we do is we make a lot of specialty materials for golf courses. So we supply pretty much just about every golf course on Long Island. Westchester County, we do a bunch, Connecticut. So that has become also another specialty market for the materials.
That's good to know, because after I get done on a golf course, they need to be speaking to you. I'm a hack. That's great. Do you do anything for playgrounds or
Yes.
sandboxes or anything like
Yes.
that that's safe for kids? And
We do. We have sometimes people come in and look for playground sand, and of course, we provide that.
good to know. And what about the pea gravel? What are people buying and using that for? I mean, explain how you get that out of the sand as well. But
Sure. And the 3/8 we call pea gravel comes out in our screening process, when we come through our shakers. And that gets typically used, it gets used in concrete as well. It gets used for a lot of decorative purposes. Probably most of the driveways out on the South Fork it's a real rich looking gravel, and a lot of people like it for driveways and different pieces like that. We use it for certain types of concrete mixes that need a certain look to it. So it goes out to a lot of the local guys there as well, and it also gets used in some environmental work.
Oh, we can attest to that. Certainly we use it for a lot of drainage type projects, embedding tanks in the ground.
Right.
It's a really valuable material.
Right.
People don't realize they just think it's pebbles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's good stuff.
Yeah.
You guys are a local Long Island firm. About how many people do you employ?
Right now we employ 23. So, yeah.
Good. Those are all full-time employees.
Yep.
And they work from, I assume, from the office-type personnel to guys that are operating the machinery and equipment on site?
Correct. Yeah, we have operating engineers there, and mainly in the plant, and equipment operators, plant operators, and our office staff. We have quality control and a few pieces like that.
Do you have any delivery guys or trucks?
We do not truck ourselves, so all of our customers provide their own delivery, their own transportation needs.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jim. Moving away from the products and the industry itself, but more along to the regulatory aspects. This is a heavily regulated industry here on the island, which is important. As we just discussed, the environment. It's in the environment. It's interacting with the environment. It's so we've got to be careful with what we do. That said, we at PWGC, we do a lot of permitting. Regina, can you tell us a little bit about the permitting process for a sand and gravel, construction materials mine?
Sure. So the permitting process for a mine here on Long Island and throughout New York State is pretty extensive. When we have a client that is looking to mine a property, the first thing we'll do is take a look at that particular property. We'll take a look at what its past uses are so that we can identify if there could be any potential environmental concerns at the property. We'll take a look at the surrounding properties to identify if those could contribute to any sort of potential environmental issues at the mine site. Once we do that, we take a look at, often will recommend that we install some soil boring so that we can take a look at what the type of material is. If the material is something that looks like it could be a good product, we'll install some monitoring wells. We'll get some baseline sampling. And usually with that, we're looking at a whole range of analytes, SVOCs, VOCs, metals, pesticides, herbicides. So it's a pretty extensive list. So once we've collected all of the information, we compile it into what's called a hydrogeologic report. It talks about the types of material that is at the site. It talks about groundwater quality. The report also talks about, again, the surrounding uses or past uses at the property. This is used as a supplement to the permit. And the reclamation plan is basically a plan that shows what the final use of the site is. So for Jim's site, he has a reclamation plan, and the final use is eventually a construction of, I think, 172-acre lake.
If Jim bought a new piece of property and wanted to dig a new mine, how long would it take, from the beginning to get his permit? In terms of, is it months, years, decades? How long does the permitting process take?
It's an extensive process. It's expensive. Best timeline would probably be about 2 years between the initial site investigation, baseline sampling, and then design and permitting.
2 years. Wow.
At least.
That's quite a wait. But what if he's got an existing mine, like we do at Roanoke Sand and Gravel, and he wants to either expand it horizontally or vertically, go deeper? Is that a similar lengthy process?
It is. Yes, it's similar. We're still going through the same steps as far as site investigation. If they, for example, if a site wants to go deeper, we're going to be dropping some soil borings in there and trying to figure out, is it feasible, what the material's like, and then it's a new mine plan, a new reclamation plan, a new mining narrative, a modification to the permit, and that's about probably maybe a little less than 2 years, but still in that same time frame.
As far as the regulatory agencies, what kind of oversight do they have? Once the mine's up and running, do they visit the site? Are they inspecting it? I mean, I know we're sending them reports, and stuff like that, but what's their role? What do they do?
So the DEC Mineral Division is heavily involved in all of the sites across New York State. We're in Region 1. That division will come and inspect the mines.
As far as the DEC, they are probably monthly, come and visit the site and keep an eye on things with us.
That's pretty frequent.
Yeah.
And when when there's something that they find that needs to be addressed, they'll come out there and, look at it and make sure it was addressed. There are, for some of the sites, groundwater sampling requirements. Those in the permit, and so those get reported. Those results for the groundwater sampling at these mines get reported to the DEC based on what the permit conditions state. So it could be quarterly, it could be twice a year.
Groundwater here on Long Island, we're a sole source aquifer. That's where we get all our water from, whether it's for drinking, irrigating, cooking, cleaning, whatever it is. So it's a precious natural resource. So there's been a lot of public concern lately about construction materials or sand mines and the water table and how it may impact it. So what's being done right now to monitor groundwater quality at a sand and gravel operation?
At Jim's site, again, he has a network of monitoring wells, some shallow, some deep. They are monitored and sampled on a quarterly basis. We are analyzing for total and dissolved metals, SVOCs, VOCs. It's a very long list.
It's an extensive list, huh?
Yeah. It's and again, I mentioned it earlier. It's not unsimilar to what you would find at any sort of other kind of remedial or environmental site.
Another sort of hot topic with sand and gravel mines has been, it's been associated with this illegal dumping. It's been in the news lately here in Long Island, New York City. My understanding is solid waste is not permitted to be placed into a mine.
Correct.
Can either of you guys elaborate on that? What's the regulations? Who's enforcing that? Who's making sure it's not happening?
So again, the DEC has a division that goes out to these mines and they do inspections. If they see something like that, they would definitely trigger a violation. Part of most of these permits also include, a condition that they're not to be dumping material from off-site into the mine site. On another note, waste disposal is also permitted under another division at the DEC, the solid waste division.
Yeah.
Dust control is another issue. Being that it's a wet operation, pretty much everything is pretty moist, so we don't typically get the dust that we used to years ago when we were dry screening. But we mitigate that with vehicles that we have to put water down on our driveway, a lot of our roads throughout the sand pit. So we keep dust control very, very clean as well. There's again, because it's a wet operation, doesn't really create that kind of dust that it used to, or that a typical dry operation would.
That's good to know. What about, say, like declines in the water table? Regina, any comment on that?
There's been some studies and some research done. We actually put together some research based on some concerns of a civic association on Long Island that thought that a local mine was drawing down the water table in their neighborhood, and we did not find any evidence that was the cause. What we did find is that the water table rises and falls in a cyclical pattern. So there'll be periods of drought where the water table is lower, and then years later, there could be periods of time where the water table is up higher.
So, Jim, you mentioned, you guys have been doing this, the Barker family, since 1984. We know the aerial extents or the horizontal extents of the mine. We know how deep you can go. You've got a good idea of how much material is left that you can probably mine out. How much longer? How much longer can you go at this site?
That's the big question a lot of people have, and it's really hard to nail that down because it depends on the volume of material being used. We probably at our maximum we've put across our scale 1.5 million tons a year. Right now we're down to probably about 400,000 tons. So that's a substantial drop in business.
Just looking at a crystal ball, we've got this $2 trillion infrastructure spending plan coming out. A lot of that's going to go to New York. A lot of that's going to go to New York City and Long Island. You can see our infrastructure, the roads, bridges, a lot of stuff is crumbling. We need to get to work. We need to get to work fast. We're going to need these materials. I would see that as a potential uptick in business for you guys in terms of demand. What do you think?
That will absolutely accelerate tonnage for us. Hopefully we do get to that point. Our roads are in dire need. But yes, if that bill comes through and we get to the spending that's needed, I would imagine our volume's going to increase quite a bit.
So we're getting to the end, but I do want to just ask, you guys, if you maybe can just explain the importance of sourcing our materials locally as opposed to, if we stop mining on Long Island, what happens? We still need this material. Where are we going to get it from? How much more is it going to cost? I mean, there's, trucking it in longer distances, more carbon emissions or greenhouse gas emissions. I mean, what's your take on that?
Well, yeah, it's a concern. Most people are not aware of the fact that sand and gravel is depleting throughout the world. Forget just Long Island, but right here on the island, it is going to be a major problem. If we're producing in our pit alone 1 million tons a year, that's 1 million tons of material that needs to come across the bridges to be brought onto Long Island. So that beats up the infrastructure big time and creates a lot more traffic, a lot more emissions. It compounds things tremendously. It's essential that the mining operations, the existing mining operations, are allowed to continue the process until we can extract the materials that are really there.
The cost to truck the materials too. I think when you get between 30 to 50 miles from a construction site, the cost to truck the materials exceeds the cost of the materials.
Yes, that's correct. And because of the depletion of materials, the price for materials is coming up, and of course regulation doesn't get that easy either. So there's a lot of extra costs in producing this material, especially when you're dredging. It creates a lot more expense. The trucking numbers will be, they could double the cost of the material itself. Really, that's a reality that we could be facing once we do deplete them.
Wow. All right. So can you tell me what's so special about Long Island sand? There's New York City wants it for construction. Other places, it's a pretty well sought after material. So what differentiates our sand from, say, other areas of the country or even the state?
Sure. Well, typically throughout the northeast coast, there's the deposits of material left behind from glaciers or wherever, way back before I was around. The Northeast has a great quality of material. It's a if you can picture it, a lot of sand mines, especially as you move south or even as you move east on Long Island, the sand tends to get fine, and that means the particles are smaller. And it's all quartz, so it's a hard material. But what's used in higher strength concrete and for stronger concrete is a sand that's coarser. So this sand in the Northeast is typically coarser than you would find down south or in other parts of the country. There are other deposits of good sand and gravel around the country, but the Northeast happens to have it naturally. and it's really what's needed to make really, really strong concrete.
Very interesting. So, we mentioned, there is a finite amount of material that you can haul out of the ground, your reserves, and once you deplete that, we've got this massive hole, right? A lake. What is the intention, once we're done mining here? Is it going to be, what's the reclamation? Regina mentioned the reclamation plan. She started to go into that. What's the long-term plan for the site once you guys are done?
Well, just to answer the reclamation piece, we do concurrent reclamation with our mining. So typically that's been a concern of the public, is a mine operation happening and then no reclamation. Today the DEC is really strong on that, and that's really what the mining permit is all about, is reclamation and making sure that we're mining to a regulation.
And you provide a bond for that.
Yes, we have to put up a bond to cover whatever reclamation is on site, which we do. But in our site, we're doing it concurrently with the mining, so that we don't have to go back and do it. So when we finish areas of the mine, we reclimate it. Our biggest reclamation is some of our slopes. They're maybe 150 feet of elevation. They're all vegetated at this point. They're all completed. Perimeter road around the lake as well. So at this point today, we have, our reclamation is a lot simpler than it used to be. We've really finished all of the harder reclamation. So we just move along as we mine with that.
Oh, wow.
And then at the end, Paul, it'll be a beautiful lake. I have to say, the water is something out of the Caribbean, when it sits long enough. And there'll be plenty of wetland and fish habitat, wildlife. It'll be public used, I would imagine, back in, when it's completed. And
that was my next question. Is there going to be public access? People are going to be anxious to get out there and recreate, I suppose.
Yes, that is the intention. There are some designated parking areas and some shallow parts to the lake that are created. And at its end, it'll be, I would imagine, it's just going to be a park-like area where people can come and enjoy.
Not that I'm in any hurry to get there, Jim, but I'm dying to see what it looks like when it is done. It does sound like it'll be very nice, attracting waterfowl, and it'll be stocked with fish and the vegetation and, access. People can boat, fish, swim, whatever it's going to be, kayak, canoe. Could be a fun place. Yeah. So I just want to thank Regina Bykov from PWGC and Jim Barker from Roanoke Sand Gravel for joining us today on the PWGC Environmental Echo. It was a very interesting and exciting topic on the construction materials industry here on Long Island. I am Paul Boyce, PWGC President and CEO, and I just want to thank you guys for listening. I also want to let you know that if you want to reach out to us for more information or just contact us for any reason, you can get to us at our website, which is pwgrosser.com/podcast. And just to whet your appetite a little bit, our next series of podcasts are going to be based on the Brownfields Cleanup Program here in Long Island and New York City. Looking to do a 3-part series on that as well. And I hope you enjoyed today's topic, and I look forward to you guys joining us on our next.